Well, folks, this gives me a real privilege to introduce a guy who's been a mentor to so many of us in terms of all things Immunical. He's our research ambassador these days, but he had the foresight 30 years ago to be one of the three people who actually founded Immunitech when he saw what this research was doing that Dr. Bunos and Dr. Kongshaven had collaborated on. His family, as many of you know, certainly if you're Canadian, you know this. If you're American, you probably know this. If you're in another part of the world, you may not know this. But his last name is synonymous with success at all levels. From being one of the largest and most successful businesses in Canada, his business name is represented at McGill University on sports stadiums and with athletic events throughout Canada. His family's been involved in athletics also. Son, professional football player. John himself, a world-class cyclist. And also, of course, the Molson family has, throughout the years, owned the Montreal Canadiens, one of the preeminent franchises, frankly, in all of professional sports throughout the world. So wherever you're listening from, you've probably heard of the Montreal Canadiens. And if you haven't, I don't know what to tell you. But anyway, with all of that, my good friend, Mr. John Molson. John, how are you today?
Hi, John. It's great to be here.
Hey, John, you've been doing this for a long time. 3 decades is a long time to do anything, needless to say. And through your work at Immunitech, you've had the chance to see Immunical's impact on recovery in two very different populations. Can you describe them?
Yeah, correct, John. Initially, through our work in clinical research, looking at Immunical supplementation's impact on quality of life measurements, and later in a new phase of research on the subject of rehabilitation, where we were part of a multimodal intervention prior to and post-surgery. And lastly, through our collaboration with sports science firm Oracle in elite athletes.
Now, mechanistically, what is shared between these groups, i.e., the stage 4 cancer patient, somebody who's very, very ill, obviously, and on the flip side of that, somebody who's a world-class or professional athlete? What do they share in common?
Generally speaking, these scenarios place a huge demand on antioxidant defenses. So you would typically see a shift in the antioxidant pro-oxidant, or what's called the redox state, balance to a pro-oxidant state. All involve the body's capacity reserves to deal with a stress response, whether that be chemo stress, surgical stress, or training stress. In all these cases, you want to boost the body's resiliency to the said stressors by replenishing glutathione stores.
We've had a great relationship with Dr. Nathan Lewis and a company called Oracle, but most of our listeners are probably not familiar with either Dr. Lewis himself or the Oracle company. Can you share with everybody a little bit about who they are and how relevant they are to what we're doing?
Sure. Oracle is a global leader in sports, data analytics, and applied science solutions for professional athletes and teams. The company combines sports science, data analytics, and AI to optimize athlete performance, accelerate recovery, and help prolong careers. It was started by Dr. Brian Moore, a hematologist who was fascinated with what sets elite athletes apart and early on began studying fatigue in this population. Dr. Moore has used Immunical as part of his intervention protocol since the company's inception and provided this testimonial a number of years ago regarding Immunical's impact on his athletes under management. And by the way, we didn't pay for this. This is strictly from one scientist to our scientific department. In the world of elite sports, there are very small margins between victory and defeat. A key element of high performance is the ability to optimize the training response and to limit number of days lost to illness and injury. Immunical played a key role in our recovery strategies throughout the 2012 Olympic cycle, helping keep Oracle athletes healthy and well in pursuit of their peak performances. Another client of Oracle, the Oregon Track Club Elite, had this to say: the difference between achieving results at major championships comes down to the 1%, and I believe Immunical gives OTC elite athletes that 1% difference in their nutritional and recovery strategies. Since beginning our relationship with Immunotech, our athletes' recovery strategies have shown a marked improvement, and the proof is in the results at major championships. That was Mark Rowland, head coach, Oregon Track Club Elite. Now, Dr. Nathan Lewis is Oracle's clinical performance nutritionist and lead biomarker scientist who currently sits on Immunotech's scientific advisory board. In 2019, Dr. Lewis was first author on a paper published in the International Journal of Sports Physiology and Performance titled Increased Oxidative Stress in Injured and Elite International Olympic Rowers. Their interest was looking in the relationship between oxidative stress and illness or injury in international athletes undergoing periods of intensified training and competition. They found that levels of increased oxidative stress correlate with increased risk of injury and illness. Conversely, an increase in free radical oxygen defense was associated with a 30.6 decrease in illness risk. Now, why is this important? Just some interesting stats here. UK Sport and English Institute of Sport estimated that for the 12 months prior to the Rio 2016 Olympics, 109,000, and that's 109,000 days and 17,000 training days were lost due to injury and illness, respectively, as a result of 5,000 separate injury or illness incidents experienced by 1,144 athletes across 38 different sports. Now, clearly, athletes who are repeatedly ill and therefore lose training time due to illness are more likely to experience competition failure. You've all heard the expression in pro sports that goes as follows: availability is the best ability. The best athletes understand ways to mitigate these risks so they minimize game days lost.
So now, John, so all that being said, now let's turn to the field of rehabilitation. Immunotech's work in the field of rehabilitation began in 2014, highlights another approach to enhance recovery and improve outcomes. How can you begin by describing exactly what it is?
Rehabilitation is the process of preparing your body and mind for surgery through exercise, nutrition, and mental wellness to improve surgical outcomes and speed up recovery. It involves a multimodal approach that can include physical conditioning, optimizing nutritional status, managing stress, and addressing lifestyle factors like smoking or alcohol consumption. The goal is to increase functional capacity to better withstand the stress of surgery and post-operative recovery. When we started to collaborate with the rehabilitation program at the Montreal General Hospital, it involved giving the patients 20 grams of Immunical per day as part of their nutritional plan. What we have seen through multiple studies is that the patients have demonstrated improved recovery and greater functional capacity. The estimated savings to the hospital from this program go as high as $1,500 per patient, given there is less hospital readmission for complications.
John, thank you so much for that in-depth look at Immunical's impact on recovery. And what else can you share about recovery that is so vitally important and what this product provides?
Well, I mean, I can give you an example of my son and professional athletes. Probably for every minute played on the field, you're probably looking at, a number of hours off the field in terms of their approach. And the approach starts when they get up in the morning, and when they go to sleep at night, and finishes when they go to sleep at night. Essentially, they're looking at all aspects of how to maximize their ability to recover from either training or, the game, etc. And so they do all different types of interventions, whether it's nutritional interventions, stretching, chiropractic, massage. They'll go in special suits, hyperbaric chambers. So it's all about maximizing and going after that 1%. And that's, at the elite level, it comes down to those fractions. And, I call it mining the minutia. And that's what Oracle, through their work, looking at, the different aspects of recovery, is those things add up. So the fractions become big gains at the end of the year. And I'll give you an example of how sensitive the body is. Nathan Lewis gave me this anecdote that he says, some professional athletes are notoriously lazy about their diet and will come in and try and BS the nutritionist. So he had one athlete who came in and said, they had recommended the athlete take 3 servings of fruit a day. And so Nathan was sitting in front of him and says, are you following the program? Yes, I'm following the program. And by looking at his blood work, they could see that it was lower in certain aspects that indicated he wasn't consuming it. So that's how sensitive your body is. And so, those kinds of things at the elite level add up. And, you can take this approach and apply it to how you think about your own health, that, the things you do every day, while you may not be competing in an elite sport, you're competing in the game of life. So life requires movement, it requires strength. And the more you pay attention to those things over the course of your lifetime, the higher quality of life you'll have.
When you look at sports as a barometer for health, right? And we think this time of year, we hear next man up all the time in the NFL, right? I mean, I don't know how many elite quarterbacks won't be playing this weekend that have been knocked out, but I can think of a handful just off the top of my head. You probably can too. So whether it's an NFL professional football player, I think back to the Olympics. I think it was London. It may have been Rio, when Michael Phelps out-touched his competitor from, I forget where the other guy was from, but I mean literally it wasn't even by the end of his finger. I mean it was less, right? It was like they tied, but Phelps won by a hair. And you think about that, the difference between being able to compete versus maybe ending up second or third or out of the playoffs, what it costs from an economic standpoint to a world-class or professional athlete. Talk about that a little bit, and then let's go the other way back to some of the people who aren't world-class athletes like Keith Hooper.
I'll give you an example, that Oracle, um, they provide, or they, through the process of managing a team, they have thousands and thousands of data points and use AI to interpret these data points. And what they do is they give feedback to the coaches and, that everybody's different in terms of their ability to tolerate loads. People recover differently. So they empower the coach to keep the athlete, within the realm and not to push the athlete over the edge. And that's the game is when you're trying to, get a team or an individual athlete who's competing in, cycling, running, etc., to achieve their best performances, they're always on a knife edge. And, Oracle, Nathan Lewis, and, their research has shown that if you go past a certain threshold vis-a-vis this antioxidant balance, then you significantly increase the risk of the athlete getting injured or ill. And, in the Premier League or in pro football teams, you can imagine what it costs the team in terms of money if the athlete has to sit out, or even if the athlete is fighting a cold and the athlete is compromised. So, in soccer, when we were working with the impact, I spoke to the coach about 50-50 balls, so if we can improve the recovery of the impact players, what does that do in terms of, over the course of the year, just the stat on 50-50 balls where both athletes are running and say one athlete is more recovered than the other athlete, how that can turn a game around. And so it's looking at, all these disparate data and making sense of them and empowering the coaches to maximize, the training these athletes get without pushing them over the edge.
So let's move from the world-class professional athlete group, right, which is a fairly small group at the end of the day, right? Let's move to a next group, John. The aging person, the aging athlete, the person who says, "Hey, I'm still working out, or maybe I'm not working out. Maybe I'm going to get back to the gym in January, right? We're coming up on a new year, whatever their plans are, right? We have a whole group of different people, I'm sure, listening to this call. So at the end of the day, How does Immunical benefit the aging person in recovery?
Well, we were very fortunate a number of years ago to be able to recruit Dr. Wolf Droog from the German National Cancer Institute, and he was a world expert in redox physiology, studying, how this oxidation reduction essentially acts as like a signaling system in the body, and what happens as we age, in the fourth decade of life, fifth decade of life, sixth decade of life. And we ran a study looking at 65 to 80-year-old patients or individuals. And, the primary endpoint, in other words, the most important objective was looking at the effect on physical strength. So he explained to me, that one of the hallmarks of unhealthy aging is loss of muscle mass, unwanted loss of muscle mass, and loss of strength. And he said you combine that with an effect on balance, and that's, can severely compromise someone's ability to live a life that's fulfilling. You don't want to be housebound, you don't want to be trapped, and you don't want to go out on a winter's day, slip and break your hip because an 80-year-old falling or a 70-year-old falling has very important consequences. So the fundamental pillar about or healthy aging is having the strength to move and move properly and move in different ways. And that's what we showed in that study was that Immunical has a very important effect on strength over and above what we saw from another protein source. So just that alone, and I'm not talking about the effect on, immunity over the years in terms of, exposure to environmental toxins over time. I'm just talking about the effect on strength. And, maintaining your strength allows you to move. They say in aging, the less you do, the less you can do. So you want to move outside that envelope um, and to, look at the way young people move and try and duplicate that. So the biggest takeaway is its effect on strength in terms of aging.
And mention, if you will, because we've got at least two coaches that I know are on the call today, two elite coaches, one in racquetball and one that coaches senior athletes, both ironically in Southern California. And for the other coaches for a minute, and we're not talking to the non-coaches for a minute, folks, because you all can learn from this, but for the coaches, because they're with people different age groups, not necessarily elite athletes. Some of them are just, weekend warriors. They're playing a particular sport on the weekend. How can Immunical help them not only with recovery, but also with performance issues?
Yeah, I mean, the universal saying in sports, and I don't care what sport you're talking about, is be the best version of you. And so it's maximizing the individual's, abilities, capacity, and that comes through training, that comes through improving movement, improving strength, the ability to take your training, up to different levels. And so I don't care, if you're talking about a 12-year-old, you're talking about a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, it all comes down to the same things, is your body letting you do the movements required in that sport? And what are the limitations your body's putting you under to execute those movements quickly? So that comes down to being able to have the strength to do those movements, having the capacity to do those movements over time, the endurance, etc., not break down. And so, you don't have to be a world-class athlete. You're essentially, we're all human beings and we all function vis-a-vis the glutathione antioxidant system and the benefits that we can accrue from taking Immunical.
Last question, John. Let's talk longevity. I realize it's impossible to monitor longevity for as long as we've been in business, but I'm noticing, and this isn't a claim, folks, but I'm noticing a lot of the people that I started the company with when we first met 29 years ago are still with us. And they're now senior citizens in most cases. Well, in all cases, they're all senior citizens, and they're all doing pretty well health-wise, which is such a great thing to see that they haven't really, in my opinion, aged like the normal population has, and the one commonality that they have is Immunical. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Well, I can quote Dr. Bunos, and we don't have a study in human beings on aging, but we have a study in mice, which serves as kind of a tell. And I asked Dr. Bunos, why did these mice live 30% longer? And he says, essentially what Immunical gave to these mice was an improved immune response. And so they didn't succumb to age-related diseases. And, the way you have to think about health and wellness is, and I didn't appreciate this until I started working with Dr. Bunos, is all the different environmental factors and everything taken together. If you think holistically about, all the negative influences that we're subjected to on a daily basis, what Immunical taken over time essentially gives your body the resiliency and capacity to deal with all these different stressors in the environment. So, as an example, there's probably 100,000 new chemicals in the environment since World War II. And the issue is that, many of these chemicals are tested individually, but now in the environment, they essentially mix together, whether it's in the air, it's in the water, etc. And so those things, environmental factors and disease, whether you're talking about cancers, you're talking about neurological diseases, tied to pesticides exposure, etc. Boosting the body's capacity to deal with these things plays a very important role. And then in terms of longevity, we want to talk about healthy longevity. So we want to have a good quality of life as we age. And I go back to what I said about, maintaining your strength, because movement becomes more and more important now. And it's not just exercise, it's movement, different types of movement that stimulates your brain, your nervous system, and your muscles.
Great. Well, John, this has been a privilege as always. I hope everybody learned some things from it. Take good notes. Watch the video again. We will put this on our YouTube channel so that you can rewatch it, folks, because look, longevity is something that is dear to everybody, whether you're watching this or not. But it's dear to the people that you haven't talked to yet about Immunical. They've never heard of this product yet. So listen to what John shared today and share it with a friend or loved one. Thanks again, John.
My pleasure.